These are all things that are pointing to how sick he is and how much on the edge is he. And you were right on when you pointed to how much oxygen he's getting compared to how much he's oxygenating. And he's getting a lot of oxygen. He's getting more than twice room air. And he's not oxygenating well. Plus, he's already tipping his pH towards abnormal with his retaining CO2. So he's not only not oxygenating well, he's also not ventilating well. This is going to buy him an ICU admission, right? And that's based on, I just want to go into some evidence-based practice with you here. This is based on Infectious Disease Society evidence-based recommendations. And this is what will get you an ICU admission. CURB 65 scores greater than or equal to 2 will need hospitalization. And if you have extra features in your CURB score, you'll need an ICU admission. But here's the CURB severity scores for community-acquired pneumonia. And this is community-acquired pneumonia specific, right? So here's this 70-year-old man who came in with a pneumonia that he acquired while at home, right? He hasn't been institutionalized. He hasn't been in the hospital. He came in, and if he has more than 2 of these, he'll get admitted to the hospital rather than be treated as an outpatient.
We're going to go for about 15 minutes with this. Okay, and that's kind of realistic. You don't have a ton of time usually, but 15 minutes to establish kind of what's happening, what the background is. And out of all this, we're going to be thinking nursing diagnosis. Okay, so think about that as you're listening to this. So what is the issue?
And I kind of wanted to talk to you about the text message, because that's kind of why you're here. And I wanted to kind of understand your perception of it. Do you see why your teacher might have been kind of worried about it?
No, it didn't mean anything.
Why don't you tell me about it?
I was just in class and bored, and this morning I got in a fight with my parents, and you know, I was just mad.
So were you texting your mom or your dad?
No, I'm not going to text my parents. I was texting a friend.
Okay. A friend from high school now?
Yeah, sort of a friend, yeah. A new friend I've made this year.
Boy or girl?
A girl.
A girl, and is she somebody that you kind of hang out with? And
well, sometimes.
Great. I had a question. What kind of medications are you on right now, if any?
None.
None? Have you recently stopped taking any medications at all?
No.
No? Are you taking birth control at all?
No.
No? Okay. All right, so when was the last time that you saw a physician or doctor? Do you have one that you go to?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I had to go before high school started.
Okay, and what was that for? Do you remember?
Shot or so. I needed some shot.
For a vaccine?
Yeah, that HPV thing.
Okay. All right. Are you, when was the last time you had a menstrual cycle?
Maybe 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Yes, this is an example of a case study that we actually do into class. So their prep is that they actually have a very brief scenario about the case, and then they have to basically do the Lassiter critical thinking model. So they have to say what they noticed, and then what they need to know, and then they need to do some research on what they found out, and then they do get to evaluation. But what we really focus on for prepping for the class is that they put together, and then they have a chapter to read. They have an article that's based on adolescence, because it's an adolescent case, and then they have to case analysis, which is just a table format before they come into class. So from the instructor's side, that gives us some assurance that the prep actually has been done. And then they come into class, and it varies. In today's class, we actually got to have a sort of a role play with someone playing the character. Sometimes we have students role play within small groups. It just sort of varies. But for this one, the prep hopefully sets the stage for when we're in class. And then in class, I have a structure about basically reviewing what they come in with and reviewing what they know, and then having them prioritize what is missing. And so trying to get them to do the, noticing patterns and the critical thinking of it. And then having, I think another goal of mine is that they see therapeutic communication as a tool. And so just like I use a blood pressure cuff to take blood pressure, and I figure out something from that information, the same thing with therapeutic communication. So I have them prioritize the communication and then have sort of what are they going to have at the end? In this case, is this person safe, and what's the level of depression? So she, through that structuring of that this is the tool, is you listening in your presence. I mean, that is the tool. And so that's my hope, is that that's the message that comes across. And then all the structure leads up to them actually using it in class. So the whole flipped classroom idea of prepping them beforehand and then having them actually apply it in the classroom. So for me, the applying on this one was being able to do an appropriate psychosocial assessment, looking for depression, and then to be able to assess for safety.
Imagine this. You've just arrived on shift. Your patient is going to radiology for a scan right now. You literally come on the floor. It's the patient you had yesterday. You're asked to accompany the patient down to radiology and then pick up the rest of your assignment when you get back. But they need somebody to take the patient right now. When you were headed home yesterday, the family was discussing the possibility of the DNR order with the physician, sort of as you were headed out. But in this transfer, the day shift nurse doesn't say anything to you about the code status, and you don't think to ask. You get the patient down into radiology. They start the procedure. You sort of get them onto the table. They're starting the procedure. And within a very short period of time, the patient arrests. Everybody starts CPR. About 7 minutes into the CPR, and you're assisting with the CPR, somebody has pulled up the electronic record and realizes that a DNR order was written yesterday during evening shift. CPR is stopped. You need to go back up to the floor now and talk to the family, who you know.
She would ask questions, but there wasn't necessarily an answer to the questions. We would ask a question, and she would build on that and then ask us a question back, and then we would have to think through it on what would we do, and it really made me think, and it got my mind going, like, what would I do, really? There was no answer to it. And
if you anticipated that she had a fluid imbalance, what would you anticipate the trend of her BUN and creatinine being? How would you see it change?
I think an increase in BUN, because it'd be indicative of maybe like dehydration, and then maybe a decrease of creatinine if she's actually having like something pathologically going on with her kidneys.
Okay, if it's pathological for kidneys,
would go up.
her creatinine goes up. But remember, there's that 10-to-1 ratio with creatinine and BUN.
Okay.
And so when BUN rises out of that 10-to-1 ratio, then 90-some% of the time it's due to dehydration.
Okay.
But isn't
Right.
creatinine more like long-term kidney function? So if it's something that was a very recent within the last 4 days, the BUN might be a lot higher, but the creatinine may or may not have changed.
If there's kidney damage, they both elevate basically in that 10-to-1 ratio.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so if there's some kind of kidney damage, you're going to see both of them elevate and maintain that 10-to-1. If the 10-to-1 goes away, and all of a sudden the BUN rises a little bit more than that creatinine and it gets out of that 10-to-1 ratio, then there's fluid issues usually.
Okay.
So what other labs besides, now you said all those other electrolytes.
Well, I was giving